the session open and welcome to meeting number 19 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on the Procedure and House Affairs. The committee is meeting today to consider the main estimates of the Chief Electoral Officer, and I'd like to welcome our witnesses.
The floor over to you, and you can also introduce who you've brought along with you today.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
So with me, I have Mr. Marc Limoges, Chief Financial Officer, Dirigeant Principal des Finances, and Madame Sue Trojan, Executive Director of Public Affairs and Civic Education. Alors, merci, Madame la Présidente, de me donner la...
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for inviting me to present to the committee today the Elections Canada's 2022-2023 main estimates. And I will also briefly update the committee on the closing of the 44th general election and some of our priorities as we move towards the next election. Elections Canada is funded under two distinct authorities, an annual appropriation and an ongoing statutory authority. The committee will vote today on the annual appropriation, which amounts to $49.3 million and represents the salaries of some 530 indeterminate positions, and this amount is the same as last year's fiscal year's voted appropriation, with some variance for new collective agreements. The ongoing statutory authority covers all the other expenses of the agency. This funding model ensures Elections Canada independence by allowing it to access the funds required to plan and deliver elections, which may occur at any time. Planned spending under the statutory authority is reported annually to Parliament for transparency and accountability. The statutory appropriation for the 2022-2023 fiscal year, as reported in the main estimates, totals $154.2 million. Approximately half of this amount, $78.7 million, reflects operating expenses of the agency. These costs have remained stable over the last 4 years. The other half, $75.5 million, represents expenses that are non-discretionary or that relate to the conduct of elections. This includes costs related to the last election and expenses for the preparation of the 45th general election, as well as expenses related to the work of the commissions charged with the redistribution of electoral boundaries. As we close our last election, Elections Canada is currently conducting regional meetings across the country to draw lessons from election workers in the field and to find ways to improve the administration of elections. So the audits is another important aspect, and our purpose is to finish the audit by the end of January 2023, which is within 12 months of the original filing deadline.
Election will be my recommendations to Parliament for legislative changes to the Canada Elections Act. A recommendations report is normally done after each election. However, following the 2019 election, our focus was on adjusting to the pandemic. So accordingly, this report encompasses lessons and reflections flowing from both the last two elections. The report will also include recommendations from the Commissioner of Canada Elections for better compliance with and enforcement of the Act. Madam Chair, I would add that in the past, the practice has been that after I present my recommendation, that my officials are made available to the committee for the detailed review, and I'd be happy to offer that as well. I plan to submit my report to the Speaker at the end of May, and once tabled, the report will be referred to this committee, and of course I look forward to working with the committee as it reviews the recommendations. Moving forward, our immediate priority is to ensure that the agency is well positioned to deliver the next election. Of course, this is especially important since we now have a minority government. With this in mind, the agency is currently focusing on two short-term priorities for the next election. The first is the Vote on Campus initiative. Our goal is to be in a position to offer campus kiosks in all general elections moving forward, even outside of a fixed date electoral calendar. The second priority is to improve our services offerings in order to give electors in remote communities access to advanced polls, even if this means having less than 4 days of advanced polls in some locations. In doing this, we hope to improve services for Indigenous voters in particular. This is in addition to the improvements we want to bring to the presence of Indigenous languages at the polls. These two priorities do not require legislative changes. Madam Chair, while I am here today to discuss the main estimates, I also be happy to answer any questions from the committee or clarify information the committee heard regarding its study on the inclusion of Indigenous languages on federal election ballots. So thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Perot. And once again, welcome to PROC. We will start 6-minute rounds with Mr. Kmitch, followed by Mrs. Sahota, then Madame Goudreau, et puis suivi par Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Kmitch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask you questions about the Inspire Democracy Network, so I'll just give you time to go and find it in your notes. But I'm going to start with saying thank you for spending less money. I go to a lot of these meetings on committees and have in the past, and I don't think it's said enough when a government agency comes before a committee to explain its estimates and they're spending less, so just thank you on behalf of taxpayers. I'll start with that. I know it's likely related to the election, but you got to recognize when you're spending less. The cost of Inspire Democracy Network, I would like to know Election Canada's support for this network and how much is being spent.
Sorry, I'm just going to pause real quick because, Mr. Kmitch, you're new to committee, and I know it's been a long time since you made an appearance to PROC, but at this committee, I would appreciate comments going through the chair.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Mr. Perot.
Madam Chair, I do not have the detailed cost of the Inspire Democracy program. I understand there's a question that's been posed in the House, and we are preparing that information, so I'd be happy to provide it at that time or through this committee, either way.
Could you, through you, Madam Chair, so is there any information that you can provide the committee then on how extensive is the help being provided to this network, with the number of events throughout Canada, the types of supports, other staff members who are assigned to assist them? That's also the information I'm looking for.
Certainly. Madam Chair, I'll ask Ms. Tarosian to speak to that as she is responsible for the program.
I think I'm on. And through the chair, thank you for your question. The Inspire Democracy program was initiated after a comprehensive review back in 2010, completed in 2012. It was launched roughly sometime 2014, prior to the 2015 election. It started out originally to focus on youth participation because their barriers to electoral participation were quite significant compared to the general population. And following in subsequent years, we have expanded that to electors with disabilities who also face barriers to participation, and as well as Indigenous electors and new Canadians. In terms of the network for the last election, we have 27 organizations that we worked with, informal, what I would call contractual relationships. And the intent here is for them to share information with their constituents. So, for example, young people tend to listen to organizations that they're familiar with versus coming from Elections Canada. So we work with them to make sure that they have accurate information about the election process and distribute that to their clientele, as an example. So there were 27 contractual relationships. And then there's some 600 organizations that subscribe to an email kind of information blast that we send out based on electoral information.
Okay. Madam Chair, then I'm wondering, could you, I'm wondering then, this contractual relationship, how were these organizations selected? Like, did they have to provide matching funds or contributions in kind? I'm curious then, how was that done?
I can, through you, Madam Chair, I thank you for the question as well. The way we work on this is we look across the country and we determine which organizations are working with youth and doing work in this space already, or with any of those groups that I talked about. And then we basically, it's a fee for service. It's not like a funding arrangement, it's a fee for service. So they may be creating a guide that they will speak in their own voice, but making sure that they have accurate information from Elections Canada validated on the electoral process. So those are the kinds of things. We also monitor and make sure that they all sign a nonpartisan clause as well. That's another part of the contractual relationship, and we monitor for compliance to that nonpartisanship.
So, Chair, how much time do I have left?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. You said that you review these guides, that they write in their own language, obviously, because they can communicate better with their people who follow them. Who has final editorial control then? Is it Elections Canada or the organizations?
Well, what the way the process works is they submit their documentation to us, having been provided with information from Elections Canada on the basic information. And the main content of that is what we call our Guide to Federal Elections, which is distributed to all Canadian households across the country. And it basically walks through all the elements of what you need to know to be able to register and vote in federal elections. And so they then develop their own content, and we validate that and work with them to make sure that they have accurate information. It could be used in a different voice, more colloquial language, those kinds of things than a federal government department, independent officer of Parliament could use.
Okay, so these products then, they're therefore edited by Elections Canada, is that fair?
Correct.
Okay, and you then therefore have the final decision making just to make sure that what they are saying about elections is completely accurate and consistent with the Elections Canada Act, correct? Has it ever happened that organization has insisted on putting something out that wasn't accurate?
In the last federal election, no, we didn't have any issues with
What about
that.
in prior elections?
No, we've never had any issues with accuracy.
Okay, and then I wanted to ask you as well then, through you, Madam Chair, because I can't ask you this directly. The support, you said, was a fee for service. Can you explain a bit how that would work?
So, for example, through you, Madam Chair, for example, some contractors do run events where, and I can speak to, for example, blind electors. We have a mock ballot for blind electors who aren't able, or people with vision impairment. And so some of those workshops that they may hold are how to mark your ballot in terms of using the guide that we provide to electors, because it's a new thing for many people, particularly someone voting for the first time. So they may run a workshop that shows people how to use that guide at the polls, as an example. Those are the kinds of things. It depends on the relationship and the contractor that we're working with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is my time done?
It
Madam
would
Chair?
be, yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Sahota.
Oh, thank you. Madam Chair, my first question to the Commissioner is, I'm looking forward to, I guess, a comment first, looking forward to the report that's going to be submitted in May. I think there'll be a lot of questions around how things can be improved for the next election, or what things were learned in this election that might be implemented again, even though it was a pandemic election. So I'm wondering if the Commissioner could maybe just highlight one thing that he thinks that could be kept from what we learned in the pandemic election, and then I've got a few other questions. So not too much detail on that one.
There's a few things certainly that we would want to keep. I'm thinking in particular how we serve long-term care facilities, for example, with more flexibility in serving them at different times in the calendar between advance polls and polling day, so that we can secure their vote and make sure that they are able to vote in a way that works for them, for the institutions. That's certainly one thing. We've used the drop boxes for the first time. That was by way of adaptation. Electors could bring their ballot, special ballot to a polling station. And so that's something that we may want to include in the future. It's hard when you, once you've offered something, to take it back, right? So people expect that service again. So there's a few things from the pandemic election that we would want to bring back, even outside of a pandemic. Of course, we're still in the pandemic, and we don't know when the election is going to take place. So that, of course, will influence what other measures in terms of protections we would bring in.
Thank you. That's quite interesting. Madam Chair, next I'd like to ask through you regarding the Electoral Boundaries Readjustment Act that you oversee. We've been getting some, early information as to what some of the changes might be, and I'm wondering if the Elections Commissioner could could inform us of the work that's been done thus far, when we can expect the final versions of that to be coming out, and whether the last election perhaps took up some of your, obviously a lot of your time, and whether Elections Canada was really was able to be involved in that process as they usually are.
So, Madam Chair, we provide support for the 10 independent electoral boundaries commissions. We are not involved in the exercise of making decisions for the boundaries, but we do provide technical assistance, and we set them up and support them administratively. But the commissions decide on their activities and on the recommendations that they want to make. So the work is ongoing in that regard. I know that 3 commissions have so far published a proposal. Other commissions are receiving input from the public prior to making their proposals, so they have different approaches. And certainly we would expect that the Commission's final maps or proposals would, having gone through public hearings and having gone through this committee, as the Act provides, be completed in the fall, around October of 2023. So things are in line for that. It should be noted that once the maps are finalized, they must be approved by order in council. There is no discretion there. And then they apply to any election that takes place 7 months after. So there's a 7-month period for Elections Canada, as well as your district associations, to get organized under the new boundaries, reappoint returning officers. So there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done once the map are proclaimed. They do not take effect immediately. So that would take us to spring of 24.
So, Madam Chair, through you, does that mean that your work, the technical side of the work that you provide assistance on, is more after the fact, after the drawing of the boundaries is done?
No, we provide technicians and software to the commissions, for example, so that they can work with the boundaries, look at the data that we obtain from StatsCan, and so using that data and using our software, they are able to look at the impacts of changing a boundary here or there. So we support them in that aspect of the exercise as they look at different options and make proposals for public consultation.
Do the independent commissions ever ask for advice, since Elections Canada, has lots of experience with electoral boundaries?
So we never provide any advice to the commissions on the drawing of the boundaries. At the start of the process, we did hold a conference to bring the commissioners together, have those who are part of members of previous commissions speak to their experience. We had external speakers talk about the legal framework. So we set them up so that they're knowledgeable. But once they are in the process of working on the boundaries, they work entirely independently of Elections Canada. That's by design.
Thank you. Madam Chair, through you, I'd also like to ask about the work that Elections Canada does monitoring the information environment, whether there have been more threats, security issue threats identified by your organization, what those might be. If you could shed some more light on that. Is there a growing concern of misinformation and disinformation?
So we do monitor. We've started monitoring in 2015. The 2015 election was our first attempt at social media monitoring. We've gained a lot of experience in that area since then. We monitor in some 18 to 20 languages. We chose in the last election to monitor fewer languages, but to focus on those where there's more content or it's more important. And so we look specifically for misinformation on the electoral process, whether it be domestic or international. That is not our focus, but we look on misinformation on the voting process, not on campaigns and on candidates. And so we've been doing that now for the last 3 elections. Obviously, there is a fair amount of confusion out there. Some of it may be disinformation. The important goal for us is that we be able to correct that and make sure electors have the right information.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are well over time. Thank you, Ms. Sahota. We will now go on to Madame Goudreau for 6 minutes.
Un plaisir, Madame.
A pleasure, Madam Chair. You're doing an excellent job. Thank you very much to our witnesses, it is very important to ask questions. And Madam Chair, I would like to speak on behalf of my electors, and in May we will receive the report, and if we don't have sufficient time, I would like us to be able to find a way to address our questions at the time in order to improve next steps, not just the boundaries, but also issues related to the pandemic. I am a very practical person. I have a few concerns. I have heard, Madam Chair, when Mr. Perrault mentioned that he needed more time given the pandemic. And in the end, it turned out there wasn't more time, and there was a bit of a surprise. And I wonder, what were the obstacles or difficulties encountered? You will no doubt say labor shortage, but is it a question of not having had sufficient time in advance? And will we get information in the report? Not necessarily in the report, because there's some things I've already talked about, but there will be matters in the report, for example, the vote and different solutions. There were a number of difficulties. Now, we were in the fourth wave, if you'll recall. And what happened is that there are some, property owners who said, yes, we will rent our locations. And then when the writ came down, many of the schools especially said, no, we cannot do so. So the returning officers had to start their work all over again and find locations, and that was difficult. And that, of course, pushed back information to voters. So that was the main impact, I would say. We also noted in the elections report that there were 4 fewer days compared to the previous election. We went to mail-in ballot rate of a little bit more than 1.5 to 7%. So just a few days can have a huge impact on the voting process. So I would say those are the two main issues. Madam Chair, once again, welcome back. Given what I've heard, I must say I'm a bit shocked. Of course, we want to promote a democracy, and the recommendations that Elections Canada is making, both in terms of time. I mean, we can't minimize the importance of the voters' participation in an election. So here it leads to my next question. We talked earlier about cyber attacks. Now, when it comes to technology, if we want, younger people, especially the under 40s, who would like to have different forms of voting, not necessarily a mail-in ballot, where are we at with that? Well, a study was done by the parliamentary committee in 2016 on this matter, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that was one issue around which there was a consensus that voting in Canada at a federal level should remain a paper ballot vote. Now, electronic vote is making advances and progress at the municipal level. I think in Quebec there are school elections where there are advances, and also elsewhere. So there is some progress. We're monitoring this with much interest, but we're not working on deploying electronic voting solutions. What we are working on in terms of technologies, how to better administer the vote to reduce delays and maximize a labor force, which is in decline. We had some 115,000 involved. It's not going to increase in a pandemic. So technology can play a very important role, but not in terms of the voting process. Well, that's very interesting, Madam Chair. Let's not forget that Parliament does do electronic voting. If it can be done in Parliament, I don't know that we need another pandemic or that kind of context to continue to make products. Now, we talked about labor shortage. That is a concern. What is lacking in terms of protecting privacy or security issues? I mean, given the lack of polling stations, with the actual space is lacking in Quebec and in Canada. And then we have a shortage of labor. Now, are there solutions? Might there be an increase in possible changes in voting systems? Well, in terms of cybersecurity and we're talking privacy issues. Yes, there is cybersecurity, but there's also people's practices, be it administrative staff or, the candidate staff. Now, in terms of cybersecurity, we're working very closely with our federal partners. We've been doing so for many years, especially since the 2016 presidential election, because electoral administrations around the world started to pay close attention. So we've been working with partners. We've made big investments in cybersecurity, and that remains a priority when we're going to deploy technology, not, as I say, for voting, but for everything that supports the process. Now, we're governed by the Canadian legislation on privacy, but political parties are not, and I have raised this matter in the past, and there has been a parliamentary report on this, and this is something I would like to come back to in my own report. Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting the witness finish his thoughts. Well, thank you for your questions.
I'd like to start by thanking our Chief Electoral Officer and his team for their work and for appearing at committee and answering our questions. Now, as the committee knows, my bill, the Right to Vote at 16 Act, is currently at second reading. And back in 2018, Mr. Perot told the CBC that lowering the voting age is, quote, worth considering because, quote, voting when you're 16 is voting at a time when most Canadians at that age are still in school, at a place where we can actually get to them and engage them. And, quote, we know that Canadians who vote early in their lifetime will continue to vote, and those who don't vote in the first few elections will tend not to vote later on. So there's a real benefit to making sure that Canadians vote early, and voting when you're 16, there's an opportunity to reach out to them, end quote. I'd like to ask Mr. Perot if that remains his perspective.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think these quotes were separate in a conversation and put a bit close together, more than they were so when I first spoke to the journalist. But the reality, so they're all true, all these statements. I still believe in all of them. But my main point there was that this is an important issue for Parliament to consider. It's for parliamentarians, for MPs to have those discussions, and they're having them right now. My role is to support the work of this committee, should it come to the committee, by providing data and information on barriers to vote, and should it move forward, explaining how we would implement any change relating to voting age. But I think this is fundamentally a policy decision for parliamentarians to make.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Perot. Turnout among 18 to 24-year-olds is the lowest of any age cohort in our country. Is Elections Canada concerned?
One of our biggest concern in that regard, we're concerned about turnout of all groups, but especially those who face barriers. And you're quite correct that youth do face barriers for voting. One of the main areas for us has been trying to make sure that youth can register early on. We see that there is, and I don't have the numbers here with me, but there is a registration gap in terms of the youth under 25. This is where, when you look at the Canadian Register of Electors, 96% of Canadians are on the register. Those that are missing are mainly young Canadians. And those are Canadians who do not receive a voter information card to give them basic information about where and when and how to cast a ballot. So that is certainly an area of priority for us. And as Ms. Desrosiers has explained, we also support groups by providing information on the voting process, groups that work with Canadians that face barriers and that includes young Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Perreault, and through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Perreault. What kinds of barriers do 18-year-olds face when it comes to voting in their first election?
Mainly, and I'll ask Ms. DeRosian to complete that, but mainly they face informational barriers about the voting process. This is something that is not that is foreign to them. They are not used to it, so they don't know how it works, and they don't have the same level of understanding about the process as other Canadians. Mr. Rose?
Yes, so I'll complement that with, if you look at voter participation, it's a very complex issue. There's no one particular thing that will make a difference in whether somebody votes. It's a combination of factors, and I'd say it's a team sport. Elections Canada has a very minor role. Our focus has been on improving access to the vote, so informational barriers, those kinds of things. When it comes to young Canadians, the biggest barriers that they face are actually, quite frankly, and I think you heard through your Indigenous study on the language on ballots, lack of interest is probably one of the biggest. And that comes in a couple of different ways. A lot of young Canadians feel that they cannot make a difference when they vote. We also know through our research that many young Canadians are not contacted by a candidate, less than most Canadians. So that is out in our research, and this information is all available on our website. But they also don't view voting as a choice. They don't view voting as a duty. They actually view it as a choice. So those are sort of some of the main factors, and those ones that I'm talking about are more in the what I'd call the motivational side of things versus the access side of things. And Mr. Perreault spoke to the access pieces.
Thank you, Ms. Tarosian, and through you, Madam Chair, to our witnesses. One of the other barriers that we've been hearing a lot about is a geographical one, that at 18, young people's lives are at a time of transition, and many of them, particularly in rural Canada, like the riding that I represent, many young people go away from their home region to another community to pursue school or enter the workforce. Is that seen as a barrier for voting for the first time among 18-year-olds?
Madam Chair, that is the reason why in 2015 we first piloted the Campus Kiosks Initiative, and we expanded it in 2019 across the country. And this is a program that I intend to bring back as soon as we can. We've never done it in a minority context, and with the pandemic that presented unique challenges. But we are now looking at ways to do that without the benefit of a fixed date election. Of course, young Canadians also often are unaware that they can in fact vote through other means for example, at the local returning office in the university campus where they attend school, even if their vote is cast for their home riding. So we also need to look at how we can better inform young Canadians of those options.
Am I out of time, Madam Chair?
You are.
I have more questions.
I have no doubt you're going to get another opportunity, I'm sure, very soon.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. We're going to now head into our next round. And we'll go again with 5 minutes to Mr. Comich, followed by 5 minutes to Mrs. Romanado, and then 2.5 minutes to Madame Goudreau, followed by Mr. Bachrach, and then back to 5 minutes for Mr. Comich, followed by Mr. Turnbull. Mr. Comich.
Chair, thank you. One last question on the Inspire Democracy Network. Has there ever been a review or an analysis done by Elections Canada on the effectiveness of this network and the 27 community organizations and stakeholders are part of it, whether it has been effective in increasing turnout or participation?
And I will answer, through you, Madam Chair. We actually are in the process of doing a review of that program. It's only been in effect for, like I say, since 2014. So yes, we are doing a review of that program, and that's probably expected in 2 years' time. It's not going to be complete.
2 years in May, so like 2024?
Yes, roughly.
So, Chair, I'm wondering then, the cost for that analysis is then in the estimates, like or is it just part of the work that you're doing? Is it any additional resources to do this analysis, or is it already taken into account?
No, it's part of the ongoing cost of the operating. So we do evaluations of our programs on a periodic basis, and it is part of our ongoing funding.
So I actually now have a different question, Madam Chair, on a different administrative review that's being done on those 200,000 ballots and the breakdown of it, because in a order paper question response 328, I was wondering, what was the cost of that review?
So this is part of our ongoing activities. It's very difficult to separate that out because we look at the data from all kinds of angles for different purposes at the end of the election. So I do not have a costing for that review specifically.
Okay, and then in the response that was tabled by the government, Section 267, subparagraph 4 of the Act requires that it be provided. In the response, it said April 2022, but it's May. Is that report public now? Is the response public? Because I haven't seen it, so I'm asking since you're here.
Sorry, the response on the
OPQ response I've received, but in that order paper question, it talked about a response, Chair, about having completed the review of the ballots and what happened to them in the breakdown. It said April 2022. It is now May, so I'm looking for a response.
So we do have a report. It will be in the month of May, though. It's not out yet.
It's not. Well, I've noticed it's not out yet. Thank you. I think, Chair, we've all noticed it's not out yet. Is it later in May? Is it a question of just being translated into French or into English?
I've not yet seen the draft. This is coming to me first, and then it will be translated and prepared. So it's on its way.
Okay. And Madam Chair, how much time do I have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. So just on, there's legislation before the House right now called C-14 on the redistribution of seats and a change to it. I would like to know whether in these estimates you've taken into account the possibility that the House might pass this legislation on to the Senate would pass it, and that the Electoral Boundaries Commission in Quebec would have to redo its work. In anticipation of this possibility, are there additional resources being set aside for this task?
So the main estimates are presented several months before today. So at that time, that bill did not exist when we present the estimates. However, there is a statutory authority, so the commissions do their work, and the costs that are incurred are taxed by my office as appropriate costs, simply in the sense that they relate to their work. And if they need additional expenses, they would therefore spend that money. So there is no need to ask Parliament for additional money for that. It's covered by the statutory authority. Right now, the cost estimates for the redistribution exercise do not contemplate any extension of the work.
Okay. And would you be able to provide the committee, through you, Madam Chair, on what you think will be the costing for this? I know it'll come in future supplementary estimates, but is that something you could provide the committee ahead of time? I think that should be something for the committee to consider. I mean, I support C-14, and I'll vote for it, but I would like to know what the costing would be. I said so publicly on the floor of the House, too, so just so we're clear. It's nothing new.
So the overall cost of the redistribution exercise for the commissions is just under $15 million, and Mr. Limoges will correct me here if I'm mistaken, of which there are $7 million planned for this year. So the bulk of their expenses are for this year, $7 million, and the remainder was a bit prior fiscal year and then the next fiscal year. I don't have the breakdown by commission, and of course the cost will vary depending on the size of the commission. But I do not expect any significant cost, especially if there is no extension that is required by the commission.
Good.
Thank you.
Mr. Romanado.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'd like to welcome the witnesses with us today. Mr. Comich asked the exact question I was hoping to ask, so thank you for that. One thing we heard during the last election, Madam Chair, was the difficulty in finding people to work at the election, so poll staff, people who would be working, to count the votes on election night and so on. Could the commissioner elaborate a little bit, or perhaps Monsieur Limoges, on the expenditures and any increase required to go out and get more folks interested in working on Election Day? Because we did have a lot of trouble finding folks in my riding to want to work during the election, and what kind of initiatives are you looking at to increase that, to make sure that we have adequate resources at the polls?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Prior to the last election, we did seek an increase in the tariff of fees. This is something that is approved by Governor and Council, and it was approved. So there were increases in the tariff of fees, and that also, for the first time, included provisions for overtime, which is now aligned with the Canada Labour Code. So there was a significant increase in the labour force cost of the election. The amount is $44 million in addition, comparing the labor force cost of the two last elections. The last one cost in addition $44 million in labor costs. So it's quite significant. I honestly don't know that throwing more money at it would actually provide a significant increase. We're at a point where the workforce for people who are available on a Monday in a tight labor market is limited, and people who do have a job will not, suspend their work for that. So, Madam Chair. That's it.
Thank you very much. And further to that, I know that I had heard from folks who had worked at the election that there was a delay in getting paid. And some folks had difficulty receiving the pay for the work that they did. They were waiting weeks and weeks and weeks, if not months. Given that there's such a small pool of the population that is available to work, as the commissioner just mentioned, would that not hinder people who had a bad experience in terms of getting paid on time in order to recruit them for the next election? And what could be done to rectify that? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're quite proud on the whole of the time for paying. It's in the range of 96 or 98% that are paid within 4 weeks. When we're talking about 195,000 people whom we did not know just a few weeks prior, it's quite an achievement. However, unfortunately, in some cases, there's information missing. There may be an error in the way that the bank account number information is provided, or the name or social insurance number. And those errors or missing information, there may be a missing timesheet, cause for a small number, unfortunately, some delays that can be significant, especially if the information is packed away after the election and it's held locally in the returning offices. Over time, we are looking at changing our systems for recruitment and pay and making them better integrated, and hopefully having more access to the data remotely from headquarters, not waiting for the timesheets from the local returning officers, and reducing the number of errors. But for the bulk of the workers, we provide very quick payment.
Thank you very much. And now my next question will be for Madame Torosian. My apologies if I didn't pronounce that properly. One other area we hear a lot about is not misinformation, but a lack of information or education regarding the electoral process. So, for instance, the last election, I was still explaining to folks that you could go vote at the returning office and that you don't need to have an excuse that you're going to be absent, because that is something I think used to be in place many, many years ago. But a lot of Canadians don't know that, there are many options on how to exercise your democratic right. Could you elaborate a little bit on some of the initiatives that you're doing to educate? I know, we've talked in terms of candidates to get folks out to tell them that they can do that, but what other outreach efforts are you making in terms of the budget? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and through you, Madam Chair. We actually spent a lot of energy focused on the 4 ways to vote in the last general election, and the voting in the local office was one of those 4 options. The first being the voting at your polling location, your assigned polling location on Election Day, because that is how most Canadians still vote. Secondly, being the advanced poll voting option. The third being the vote by mail or special ballot, and then the returning office was the third option in terms of the order of which we presented it in. We also increased we started our promotion of all the voting options, what we call the early voting phase, earlier in the election, 1 week earlier actually than traditionally in the electoral calendar. And we increased our budget on that phase of the election because we knew in the pandemic that people would be seeking other options to vote. We also did a lot of outreach through our Inspire Democracy Network, some 600 organizations, to get the word out around that with the groups that are known to face more barriers to electoral participation. So it was a very big focus for our campaign. It is also noted in our guide to federal elections, which is distributed to all Canadian households. All of the options to vote are presented there. And of course, it was also noted on the voter information card that individuals get. So we continue to put those messages out there. We use social media, advertising. It's a very multimedia campaign, very expensive campaign. And the recalls are quite good, but there are some segments of the population who are not always aware. And we do track that up to people that generally aren't registered as often because they don't get their voter information card. And that's where most people remember what their voting options are because it's an individual card addressed to them with what their individual voting options would be. So some segments of the population will have less knowledge.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I know the pride that you would have in the institution, but I find 4 weeks when you're expecting a paycheck to be a long time. So we could talk about that offline, but I feel like a long time to wait for a paycheck, especially because we know how challenging it's been for people. And I didn't know that, and I advertise for you all the time, and I'm always like, it's one day of good work, but I just feel like that's a long time. So I just wanted to put that out there. Madame Goudreau.
J'ai 2 minutes.
I have 2.5 minutes. Well, there are many solutions. 4 weeks before getting paid. Problems with space availability. It's not because we, give more money to people that they'll actually come. And then the pandemic changed everything, given the vaccination passports. Everything's electronic. Now, there needs to be a level of trust for people to go and vote. So we parliamentarians have a role to play. We have to make that difference for a better future. Now, if we want to increase turnout, we have to provide the means. And I hear the gang in Laurentides de la Belle saying, well, you know where to find us. You're already sending us notifications through our smartphones. Not everybody has those. We've talked about that now. Could we envisage new ways? So, Madam Chair, that is where we're at. And amongst our priorities, we have a lot of items we want to work on. And one would be an app for those voters who would want to do that, get their information that way. We're not going to impose an app, but an app does have the advantage of following people where they are because people carry their smartphones with them. It also allows for updates if there's any change or any reminders to send out. So yes, indeed, there are things to be done. There are things being done in Ontario with the provincial election. They have an app, and we're going to assess the success they have, and we will evaluate lessons learned. So yes, that is in our sights. Thank you. And Madam Chair, I have 30 seconds left. What I would like our witnesses to tell us, what can we parliamentarians do to help you achieve your goals? I mean, if it is to protect privacy, I mean, this is something upstream for us then to be able to do the work because the next elections will come very quickly. Thank you.
Madame
Madam Chair, I agree. We are in a world of crisis and confidence, although I do think Canadians do have a great confidence in Canada's electoral systems, but it is fragile, so we have to be attentive to that trust. And security and privacy are really at the heart of the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Over a dozen countries around the world, including Argentina, Scotland, Wales, several German states, have lowered their voting age to 16. And I wonder if Mr. Perot is familiar with the international experience with lowering the voting age, and if, on balance, those experiences have been positive ones.
So, Madam Chair, I am aware, especially in Scotland, but also in, I think, Brazil has lowered their voting age. There's a number of countries that have done that. There is talk in the UK of extending that, so I understand that, but I can't speak more broadly about the how it's been perceived or received in those jurisdictions. That is something that I don't have here with me.
Madam Chair, for Bill C-210, the Right to Vote at 16 Act, the coming into force date is 6 months after the bill receives royal assent. I'm wondering if Elections Canada would see any major logistical or administrative barriers to implementing Bill C-210 and providing the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds in Canada.
Off the top, and I'd be happy to appear, Madam Chair, before this committee should the bill come there, I do not see major obstacle. We would have to, of course, adjust a register of electors to make sure that 16-year-olds can register directly online. Now they are in the pre-register of electors, and so there are some adjustments to our systems with that would have to be made. Certainly, we'd have to come up with a voter education campaign to make them aware of that change. It would be a significant change. But beyond that, I don't see any major implementation issues.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my final question for this round. Canada lowered its voting age from 21 to 18 back in 1970. What has the voter turnout trend between 18 and 24 years, among 18 to 24-year-olds, what has the voter turnout trend been since 1970 when we lowered the voting age?
So my memory doesn't reach back on that data. I'd be happy to provide.
I wasn't born, so, you know.
The data that we have, I can certainly provide to the committee. There are ups and downs in voter trends on the various elections. There was a rise a few years ago in youth turnout, and then a bit of a decline after that. But I'd be happy, Madam Chair, to provide the data to the committee.
Thank you. We look forward to that data. Mr. Stanley, 5 minutes to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. My first question, I'm going to follow up with some of the questions my colleague Tom Comich had, was when we're getting the boundary redistribution reports, the original proposals, there seems to be a delay because they have to be translated into French. Is that one of the delays? Because we've heard there some should be out, but it's taking a bit more time. So is there an issue with getting the translations done in a timely manner?
I've not been informed of any problems. Obviously, translation takes a bit of time. I've not been informed of concerns, but I will follow up on that if there are any concerns or issues regarding translation. Obviously, they do need to be provided in both languages for public consultation, and that is part of the normal process.
Okay. Would that be adding an additional cost? You talked about the budget already, so that cost for the translations would be built into the budget that you received last year, or this budget coming forward?
So again, the costs of the redistribution process are paid out of the statutory authority. So there's a planned expense, but it can vary. And should it cost more, then we can vary the expenditures. My role in that is to certify that the expenses incurred by the commissions are properly related to their work, and once that is done, they are paid. So there is no requirement to seek additional funding to cover their costs.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm going to move and ask a question related to my NDP colleagues' comments around the change in the age of voting. So from an election readiness standpoint, if you had to say add 2 million more voters to the voter list and registry, what does that look like? Does the organization have to scale up for that? How long would that process take to ensure that we get everything in order and have those voters added to the voter list? What would that look like from your standpoint, from an organizational standpoint? And would you need to scale up staff and a few other extra resources?
Mr. Stanley, I just remind that comments are made through the chair. It's always good to have you here. Mr. Perot.
I'd be happy to come back and give this some more thought. I was not prepared to speak to this subject today. I mean, certainly if you increase the population, you need to increase the number of polling divisions. You need to look at so that there's, not an inordinate number of people in each poll so as to, that they be better served. So there may be requirements to increase the number of staff, not at headquarters so much as in the field to support that. Of course, increase ballots and so forth. So we'd want to look at that carefully before providing a definite answer. But certainly, processing any significant increase in the voter population does require additional work and resources.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll yield my time to Mrs. Block for the last minute or a half.
Yeah, you got time. You got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
I'll give you 3. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have a number of questions that I would like to ask you, but I'm going to have to focus my attention just on a couple. I did note, and through you, Madam Chair, to the witnesses, I did note that in your departmental plan, you have outlined some of your priorities. And one of the first ones that I wanted to ask you was around monitoring the information environment in order to identify security issues that could prevent the agency from delivering on any part of its mandate or that would impact electoral integrity. And I guess my question would be, what do you see as the major threats? What are the major threats that there could be to your agency and your ability to deliver on your mandate?
So leaving aside cybersecurity here, in terms of monitoring the information environment, what we're talking about here are two things, basically. The most important one on an ongoing basis is disinformation or misinformation about the process. This is particularly acute around the election period, but we do monitor on an ongoing basis, and where appropriate, we take action to correct or reach out to the platform so that they can adjust or react based on their policies. So there's the misinformation on the voting process, and I insist on that. The other aspect during an election that we've seen, unfortunately, in the last election is an increase of incidents of violence or abuse vis-a-vis poll workers. And so that is quite unfortunate. We had over 100 instances where police had to intervene. And these are ordinary Canadians, serving their neighbors. And we've seen instances that were quite disheartening in that regard. And so we need to be alert to that and monitor it to get some signals as to whether incidents could happen, whether additional security is required, and whether police forces need to be informed of that.
Thank you. If I may, another question through you, Madam Chair. In addition to the priorities that you've outlined, you also state that Elections Canada intends to adopt a hybrid and flexible work model that would allow employees to work remotely. Could you, I completely understand that during the pandemic, work models needed to change in order to allow people to work from home. But could you describe for us the model prior to the pandemic and what the gains may be in moving towards a permanent, flexible work model?
Certainly. Until the pandemic, everybody working at headquarters was working from 30 Victoria in Gatineau. And there was the possibility of on an individual basis of asking for telework arrangements, but these were quite exceptional. And to be quite frank, they were not in the culture of this organization much more than in any organization. What we've realized during the pandemic, after some initial adjustments, was that in fact the telework mode functions quite well for us. And over 90% of our workforce wish to continue to work remotely. Some have since moved during the pandemic to other locations and are fully engaged in the work of the agency. We were able to deliver this election working pretty much entirely remotely. There was a handful of people at headquarters during the election. The rest were working remotely, and it works quite well whether you're doing, for example, call centers, whether you're in a task force to engage remotely. That creates a lot of flexibility for recruitment, and we are in a tight labor market. Young Canadians want that flexibility, and it creates a very dynamic. We believe we can offer a very dynamic workplace with the hybrid model. So we are fully embracing that. Madam Chair, the additional point I was make is that at every election cycle we spend a fair amount of time, effort, and money because we ramp up in terms of the workforce, finding space. Setting it up with cubicles, desks and chairs, computers, and then securing the lines. We talked about security to those. And then we do that about a year before the election and then carry it after, because closing an election takes about a year. And so for almost 3 years, we're in the ramped up mode, and then we go down, and then we start searching again for space. And it's expensive and it's not efficient. We're not going to do that anymore. We can save quite a bit of money by having everybody work from home during the election, as we did in this election.
Thank you. Mr. Turnbull.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Mr. Perreault, to you and your team, thanks for being here as always. It's great to see you and talk to you and get a chance to ask you some questions. I've heard throughout our conversation today 2 themes that I want to focus on, which are security and public trust. I have a concern with the rise of misinformation and disinformation, and I believe that it's harming or has the potential to harm and is harming the public trust in our democratic institutions and, in fact, in our electoral process. Do you share my concern, Mr. Perreault? Through the Chair.
Madam Chair, the issue of, as I've indicated, the issue of misinformation, disinformation has been a concern of the agency for several years now. It's certainly not declining, and so it's a much broader issue than the electoral process. My role is limited in that regard, but certainly it impacts democracy in a broader way and society in a broader way. So these are issues that go beyond Elections Canada, but in terms of my mandate, this is something that we feel is important that we need to address.
Thank you, Mr. Perreault. Through you, Madam Chair, I want to follow up on that and just say, I know that when you appeared here in February, along with myself, along with other members of Parliament on the committee, expressed some deep concerns that have emerged over the last 2 elections. I think you alluded to this in one of your last comments about the increased incidence of violence and hate. It's the level of vitriol. And we've seen it for candidates, volunteers, obviously election workers or poll workers. It's increased as well. So it seems like the vitriol, hate, and conspiracy theories are contributing and becoming more mainstream in Canadian politics. And it's really, I think, eroding the quality of political discourse that we have. So, and I note that, recent polls at the University of Sherbrooke shows a growing number of Canadians are falling victim to online conspiracy theories. Another researcher at Queen's University, professor that studies extremism, says the number is massive and absolutely surprising and worrying. So the consequence of this during an election campaign could be extremely serious. And well-funded groups can spread disinformation and hatred, and they are influencing a growing number of Canadians through well-organized disinformation campaigns. So, and I don't want to suggest that it's solely up to Elections Canada to deal with this issue. I don't believe that. I don't think anyone here would imply that. I just think that Elections Canada does have a role to play in combating this, certainly around elections, and we don't want to see it rise to a point that it erodes the public trust in our democratic institutions, which are so foundational. So could you update the committee on the progress being made at Elections Canada to combat this type of behavior during election campaigns, and are there additional funds that you've asked for or requested that would help you address this?
So thank you, Madam Chair, I'm not asked for additional funds. We do have a capacity. We've built a team over the years. We do rely to a certain degree on our statutory authority. It's an example of how useful it is to ramp up our capacity during election time to monitor on disinformation. I will be, sorry, we'll be coming back to the whole issue of communications in my recommendations report. Our regime of communications, or our regimes under the Elections Act has been focusing primarily on advertising, because when it was first enacted many years ago, that was the main means of communications during the campaign, apart, of course, from door-to-door knocking. Now, there are many other ways, of course, to communicate during an election, and I think the rules need to be adjusted to reflect that reality. So I will have some recommendations in that regard, in particular to increase the transparency of electoral campaign communications, not just by candidates and parties, but third parties as well, and recommendations regarding funding of third parties. But this is one aspect of a much, as you indicated, much broader issue.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Perot. Last time you were here, I also asked you about the issue of hate groups and the potential for them to register as political parties in order to get privileged access to important legitimate tools for political parties, such as tax rebates and the list of electors, which is deeply concerning. In response, you had said that there may be mechanisms that we can put forward that would at least allow us some safeguards against hate groups getting access to those privileges. Could you just update us on any progress made on that front?
Madam Chair, as I indicated then, and it's true, I do have a recommendation in my recommendation report to speak to the issue of registration of hate groups and deregistration of hate groups, not so much as to regulate hate speech, which is not my business, but however to make sure that hate groups are not subsidized, or not receiving the benefit of a platform under the Elections Act. So I'll be happy to speak more to that when I make my recommendations.
Excellent. So just because of the time, I think for us to maximize our time with our guests, we'll go around and do one question, because I do notice the answers are a little bit longer than the questions. So I feel like that would bring us then to time. I think you need to be thorough and fruitful, so I understand that. But I think it would just provide us to get us to 1 o'clock and to be able to maybe tie up any loose ends. So with that, to the Conservatives.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'll take the opportunity to ask one last question. I'm looking at the main estimates and looking at the statutory appropriations, and I'm looking at the line in regards to electoral expenditures. And for the year 2021-2022, it is marked at 109,150,000. Is that correct?
I don't have the number in front of me. My colleague does.
Okay.
Keep in mind that for 21-22, these were the numbers in the main estimates.
Yes.
This did not take into account, because it was not a fixed electoral calendar, the costs related to the delivery of the election, though we had planned readiness costs. So we have, as in this series of main estimates, costs for preparation, but not costs for the delivery. So when we report back on our activities and our spending for the year, those numbers will be increased, of course.
Okay, so then just looking at the main estimates for this year, 2022, 2023, and I am just trying to understand the numbers as presented, and just based on the explanation you've just given, does that number, that increased number of 133 million, does that take into account the costs of executing the election in 2020, 2022?
In 2020.
2020, 2021.
Yes, so there are some costs that remain to be paid regarding that election that will materialize in this fiscal year. So we have specifically $28 million of that amount that are related to the previous general election.
Okay, thank you very much. And one really quick follow-up to that. I imagine that Elections Canada, when we are in a cycle where we are in minority parliaments, has that pressure of trying to do a report on the previous election while trying to be election ready. And so are there other costs contemplated in the main estimates here in ramping up for the next election?
There are. So there's $44 million that are planned in this year in relation to the ramping up. Now, that number may fluctuate depending on the political environment. So one of my roles, Madam Chair, is to monitor that environment and not overspend, but also to be ready. So I have to gauge that carefully. And so we have of that $44 million that are planned for this year.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Madam
So that was about 2 minutes and a half. So I will pass that same time to the Liberals. Mr. Fergus.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Puis Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mr. Perot, it's always a pleasure to welcome you. With the last Parliament, you provided advice, amongst many advices, to change the polling day instead of a Monday to consider Saturday, Sunday. Do you still think this might be a good idea? And I would like to give you the opportunity to explain why, because I have my ideas, but I think it's important for you to explain. I think the opportunity to vote on a Saturday or Sunday instead of a Monday, and not in addition to a Monday, that's an important distinction. And we had that discussion under debate on C-19. It gives voters some flexibility, gives flexibility to those who might like to work for the elections, even if they are already employed, even if they are students. It would help us with recruitment. It would also give us more access to schools. 46% voters in 2019 voted in schools. I don't have the figures for this last election, but when you add a Monday to again, there are going to be locations that are not available for 3 days in a row. So I think to provide more opportunity to voting is a good thing, but my preference is for a weekend rather than over 3 days. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, through you, I have another question. There are a number of countries who do hold elections on a weekend. Could you think of any? I'd say there's actually a minority of OCDE countries that vote on Mondays. The majority of countries do vote on weekends. In Europe, the vote is traditionally on a weekend, not on a weekday. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Madame Goudreau.
Madame Goudreau? Madam Chair, I will be brief, and we'll make it by 1 p.m. I thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity to ask questions. There were many questions asked of our witnesses, and we will have some additional questions when the report is out. I do have many concerns with regard to what Elections Canada may not have within the prescribed deadlines. We've just compared our country to the other countries. Now, with issuing reports, to have deadlines, to have a report May 22, and just a few days ago, my official responsible, who's quite elderly, is still trying to provide information. He's a volunteer. Now, there must be reasons for these delays. I do understand we have to prepare well in advance, but once it's all over, we also, have to do things efficiently because there's always more to come. Yes, Madam Chair, this is a very important issue. We've reduced from 18 months to 12 months all of these the deadlines, but half of the candidates issue their reports after the statutory deadline and ask for extensions. And this has an impact. because when you reduce the audit delay reports, you know, you're looking at risks, you're looking at trends, you're looking at outliers, the anomalies, and we can't do that until we have all of the data. We can base ourselves on the past, but there's going to be a delay in our analyses. Why? Because some half of the candidates don't provide their reports within the prescribed deadlines. They're entitled to some extensions, and half of them avail themselves of that. Now, we have managed to reduce from 18 to 12 months, and we've changed the process in two ways. One, we don't ask detailed invoices for every little bitty thing. Second thing, we allow for accelerated preliminary refunds, especially in a minority context. We want to ensure that the refunds are issued as quickly as possible. So yes, it's an ongoing process to improve. So if efforts to make 50%, people have to issue their reports on time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Boudreau.
I wanted to ask a question about rural ridings and voting on election day in rural ridings like the one that I represent, which is the size of Poland. And I wanted to start by sharing a story about a neighbor of mine. A couple days before election day in this most recent election, she was in a horrible car accident. And she texted me from her hospital bed, and she said, "Taylor, I've never not voted. I've always voted. And I'm in the hospital, and I'm wondering what my voting opportunities are." So we called Elections Canada, and I think at the time we were told there might be a mobile poll that would go around bed to bed in the local hospital. And so we told her that. The next text I got from her was her saying that because of COVID and because of the hospital capacity, she was being shipped to a neighboring community 3 hours away. So she texted me from that hospital and said, "Now what are my options?" And so we called Elections Canada. We pulled out all the stops, explained the situation, obviously a tragic and extenuating situation, and they were told there is no opportunity for this woman to vote. Now, this is a very unique situation, granted, but there's a larger question, especially in rural ridings, of voting away from your home poll within the riding on election day. And I understand that if you're in a different province or a different city in a different riding on election day, that makes it difficult because of the reporting requirements and the timeline for reporting the results. But is there not some way, because we get dozens of stories of people who are in the riding, but they aren't close to the voting place that they're supposed to vote at. Is there not some way that people can vote within the riding, but at a different poll than the one that they've been assigned on election day? Because I think that's a way that we could really increase voter turnout and ensure that people aren't unfairly excluded from voting, like my friend from Smithers was. Through the chair.
Madam Chair, I think there are two separate issues here that are related certainly in their solution. Well, the first issue is that every election, until day 6, people in hospitals can be visited, because in a hospital setting, you'll have people from different electoral districts be visited and served by a mobile poll using special ballots. And the special ballot stops what we call on day 6, which is 6 days before the election, because we need to mark the lists that are used on polling day to make sure people do not vote twice. Now, if we introduce electronic lists, and we have the ability to strike electronically an elector, you can reduce that time to almost nothing, to a few days at worst, and allow people in hospitals who are hurt or injured just days before the election to vote, and we could strike them electronically so that their name is. So we still need some time to produce the lists, but we could reduce the risk there and reduce the number of days. In terms of voting anywhere in the electoral district, Madam Chair, again, this is something that for the longer term could be done through electronic lists. It is done in some jurisdictions. I'm not aware of impact on increased participation, but it's certainly convenient for many electors.
Thank you.
Excellent. So thank you so much to yourselves for coming to our PROC committee meeting today and answering these questions. Mr. Limoges, you never spoke. Did you want to say anything?
Non, merci beaucoup, Madame.
No, Thank you very much to you and to members of the committee. I really do appreciate being here today.
So we're going to let the witnesses be.
Madame la Présidente, c'est juste.
Madam Chair, it's because Mr. Perrault gave an excellent answer to my colleague, Mr. Backrack's question, but I would like to know if he could talk a bit more about advance polling. And I just wonder if he has the opportunity, he might have provided a little bit more detail to the answer he provided to Mr. Backrack. I may be wrong. Madam Chair, voters who are away from home can vote by mail in election, but they have to plan that in advance, and they have to obtain the ballot in advance, and they can't do that after, or can't request it after day 6. So in exceptional cases where someone suffers an injury, that is unfortunately not a solution. And at every election, people unfortunately injure themselves a few days before election day.
For coming, and we can obviously talk to you for days when it comes to elections. So we appreciate the work you do, and we appreciate you being available to members. And I hope you keep well and safe and keep up the good work. To PROC committee members, I'll just remind us that on May 10th, we'll be meeting on Tuesday. It will be in camera. The draft report for the inclusion of Indigenous languages was sent to everyone on Friday. So you will have had it for about a week and a half. Tuesday, we will start going through the draft report, and I look forward to that conversation. So with that, keep well and safe, and we'll see you soon.